Alright, this is going to be a quick overview of how to use Microsoft Excel. This is for people who need a refresher or who had missed my lecture. But here you can see I have two sets of data. So we're going to be working with both of these because they're different data set types. On one we have species, so different types of species and the number of each species. On this one we have a temperature range and reaction rate due to the range. The difference between these two data types is that here on the one data set on the on the left, you have ordinal data, or data that is not necessarily continuous. You have different types of species and you have counts, so they're not necessarily they're separate categories. So you're comparing different categories. In this data set, temperature is continuous. You don't just have a temperature of 10 and then a separate temperature of 20. It goes from 10 to 11, 12, and there's fractions of a degree between each one. So it's continuous data, so you would need a different graph type to cover that. Alright, now notice in this table that the data is not all in order. You have temperatures in you have data in order here, and 23.1 actually fits between 16 and 24. Now I'm not going to sort this now, but because I want to show you what happens if data is left like this. But to give an example of how to do graphs, now graphs, I'll go over the parts of a graph later. Here we have again ordinal data, or not necessarily ordinal, but different categories. So you need to make a graph that is applicable for the data type. In this case, since they're separate categories, I would go with a bar graph or a column graph. And if you did not see, I went from home, that's what you usually start with, to insert. I have already highlighted the data that I want, and it gives you a preview of what the graph will look like if you hover over those. These are the most common ones. Simple one here would be bar graph right here. You can click on it to move it. Now once you've made the graph, notice that you now have chart design and format. So a lot of times this graph right now has the x-axis, which is on left to right, and the y-axis has numbers. So that's, in this case, the count. Now Microsoft Excel is good at predicting some things, but sometimes you need to give it a nudge into the right direction. Notice that number is there as a chart type, but that's not what we really want. So I'm deleting that. I selected and deleted it. And if you go over to chart element, go to axis titles, we want vertical there. So vertical, this is, make sure it's selected, delete that, and number of individuals. Sorry, I'm tilting my head to try to. Okay, so when we're making graphs, we want to have both the axis labels and then the axis titles. So let's go back to add chart element, axis title, primary horizontal, and this, well, could be species. Species. There we go. Sometimes you need a chart title. Sometimes you do not. Again, if you want to do a chart title, you just go here and let's see, grid line, legend. In this case, we don't need chart title right there. You can put it in different places, but in this case, I'm just going to leave it alone. All right. So that's for the first data set. Now this data set is again continuous, so you usually wouldn't use a bar graph for that. So we went to insert again, and you could do a line chart, but notice what it does when you do a line chart. You're trying to compare the temperature rate to, the reaction rate to temperature here, but it's plotting the two separately. So in this case, it's a matter of naming that's different. So the line chart is not applicable here. So instead, let's go to a scatter plot. I believe that's this one. Yep, scatter plot. And well, that looks, the placements just by eyeballing looks right to me. But notice if you want to connect a trend line, look at how it starts here, goes down here, and then goes up. That's because 23.1 is listed first, so there's data point for 23.1. It doesn't go, it's not like, it doesn't automatically calculate what's in order if you're doing a scatter plot. You're going to have to put it in order yourself. So let's delete that. And in order to put everything in order, repeated words, you select that, then you go to data, and you can do a sort, A to Z sort. Well, that's okay. That did it automatically, but just in case you need to sort by one column or the other, in this case I want to sort on temperature, or you can sort on reaction rate if that's what you're more. But in this case, our independent variable, the variable that you probably are changing, is the temperature, and that goes on the x-axis, and the dependent variable is the one that you measure. That is probably reaction rate, so you want to sort on temperature, which it did automatically in that case, but always it's good to make sure, because it doesn't always do what you think it's going to do when you set it on automatic. So let's go back to charts. That part looks the same, but when we switch over to scatter with smooth lines and markers, you see how it is now continuous, or at least it's now in order. So now you get a better idea of what's going on. We'll put that there, and again we need to add chart elements, axis titles, primary, horizontal. That would be temperature in Celsius. I forgot the key for degree, so I'm not going to look that up now, but you can find it by inserting a symbol, primary vertical. And notice this time, since this is highlighted, instead of deleting it, I'm just going to type here, and that would be reaction rate. And I hit return, and it changed that. So this one we could do title. Let's see. Effect, affect. It affects something, there is an effect. A versus E for the word. Different meanings. One's a verb. You affect something. So effects of temperature on catalase reaction rates, as an example. Alright, one reason I'm going through this is Excel is really good for categorizing your data, putting data together, and making visual charts out of it. So it's a good tool to have, and it's something that you might use when you continue on into college. Spreadsheets have become a general tool, and you, as you continue on in life, you might encounter it in business or management. Hey, my folks. So the more you learn, the more you know how to do, the better your prospects are. So let's get you introduced to this here, and hopefully you learn how to do it, and hopefully you remember. If you forget throughout the year, we will be coming back and making charts. If you forget how, I'm going to leave this video up for you to review.